supposed to be another shorter episode, and somehow it turned into a 20-minute episode. I'm not really sure how that happened. I guess I got a little bit carried away when I was building, but here we are. Hopefully I have enough to actually talk about the entire duration of this, but I guess I'll start off with describing exactly what I'm going to be working on today. So as we continue building out west, I'm looking for things to include, details to include in the area to fill up the space a little tiny bit. And I got this idea for a sort of a, I don't want to say a junkyard or a scrapyard because that's not what it is, but sort of a lot that's just used to dump off old trailers and other machinery and stuff like that. So that's the first thing that I'm adding here. And it's just meant to be sort of a vacant lot. Maybe it's a piece of property that was used for something at some point. And I've seen this a lot in the Catskills where you kind of have a large swath of land adjacent to a busy highway or something like that. And it's really not being used for anything. Nobody's putting it to practical use, and there's just a bunch of trailers stored there and junk and stuff like that. And I thought that that would be kind of an interesting element to add across the street from our gas station here. And I like the way that it turned out. I'm, again, trying to not make it so samey like all the other junkyards, scrapyards, and stuff that I've done in the past, but I kind of like how this one turned out because it's on a hillside, so it's got a little bit more dimension to it, and it's a little bit different. There's not a scrapping facility there. It just has this vacant lot sort of feeling. And I like the touch of the police car hanging out underneath the billboard up front. I think that that's pretty cool. It seems like a good spot that if, you know, a cop might want to try to pull somebody over who's speeding coming up into that bend or something like that. So I thought that that was kind of a neat idea. And, you know, building on a hillside like this just comes with so many problems because the assets don't want to sit flat. So you end up with these assets, especially these big trailers, these 50 or 60 foot trailers that, you know, one end will be on the ground and then the front end will be floating, or vice versa. So it got a little tricky to actually get them to all sit on the ground properly. And I ended up leveling the ground underneath a lot of these assets to make sure that they didn't float. Some of them do allow rolling, so I used that whenever I could. And to roll, you use the rotation tool, and then you hold, I think it's shift or control, I can't remember. It's one of those two, but if you hold that while you're using the rotation tool, it will roll the asset, if it can roll. Not all assets can roll, and usually if they can, it's only on one axis, and sometimes it's not even that useful if it wants to roll, you know, left and right instead of lengthwise or something like that. So that is a little tip right there for you. So we're going to be doing this area in the first half of this episode, and then in the second half we're going to continue on to something else. But some things to point out with this area, the billboard that the police officer is sitting underneath, I do plan to reskin that to fit the DBEV theme and train rides sort of thing. Like, I haven't decided who is actually going to be the railroad who's doing the passenger excursions in town. So I don't know if that's going to be part of the Dry Brook and Esopus Valley themselves, or if it's a different entity that's kind of like borrowing the tracks at the same time. I haven't decided that, but whatever I end up doing, I'm going to reskin that train ride sign to properly reflect that. And I might even, I think I can't actually adjust the that commercial space one on the left there, because I think that one is I think that's a download station asset, so I can't mess with that. But the train rides billboard is one that I can, because it's a JR asset. So I wanted this curve here, it's a pretty tight curve. I wanted it to have some detail in here, and I thought, you know, something like this is going to have guardrails, it's going to have signs that indicate, you know, that there's a sharp turn coming. So I wanted to detail that as best as possible. So that's what I'm doing here, just working in these guardrails. And man, I wish that there was a way to know which direction the splines were going to face before you actually put it down, because as you can see many times when I'm trying to place them, I'm stretching it out in the wrong direction. It's backwards or something like that. So I don't know how you would preview that, or you know, how you could indicate which direction it's going to go. But that's just like one of my little observations that's just like, it's just such a pain. So here I'm working in these chevrons to indicate to any drivers that this is a turn. And what's cool about these is that they are double-sided, so if you're coming from the other direction, it tells you, you know, to go the other way and not go flying off the road. And I think off camera I did bring in the the guardrails. I didn't do it on camera. It was, for some reason, it was something I did off camera. And I thought this was a nice detail to add here too, this 14-foot 4-inch height clearance sign. I have no idea if that's what the height is on this bridge, but you know, it's a cool little detail to put in there. It could be 20 feet for all I know, but it doesn't matter. It's a cool low clearance sign, and that's something that would be on that would be very common to see on these bridges. So now at this point, we're going to continue to work our way west, and we're going to be doing some detailing here on the actual dry brook. So this is the namesake waterway, estuary, whatever. It's not an estuary. Creek bed, the dry brook, whatever. So it looks pretty damp right now. I've got a lot of water in there, but as I detail this, I'm working in more rocks and like stream bed type assets to make it look a little bit more dry, not so saturated, I guess. But I like the idea that it shouldn't be totally dry. It's not a totally dry riverbed. And for the actual water itself, I am using a spline asset that I put down off camera previously before I started recording this, and that can be found on the download station, and I like it. You know, I mean, the water in Trainz now looks pretty good. Like, it's got some nice reflections and it moves properly and stuff like that. But I opted not to actually use the water itself because this is on a gradient, and I was just not about to mess with trying to make Trainz water go down slope and go downhill properly. So I am using a spline asset, and that gives me a little bit more freedom for adjusting it and fine-tuning it and things like that. So I do like that. I like the way that it looks too, because it's kind of like dirty water. It's not like bright blue water like, you know, the actual Trainz water looks. So it does look a little bit different. This should be pretty murky, muddy water since it's like mountain runoff. Here I'm trying to experiment around with some rock assets, texture assets, and you know, I think that this is something that will probably really shine in Trainz 2019 with the parallax-based texturing, because to actually detail this creek bed, I'm gonna have to place down so many rocks, and you'll see by the end of this episode I've placed down like 100 rocks or something like that, and that's just like in this small quarter mile, eighth of a mile segment. It's not even that much. So I don't know what kind of impact that is going to have on performance at the end of the day, but in Trainz 2019 you'd be able to put down a PBR parallax based texture, rock texture, and get a similar effect. So it's not something that I messed around too much with in Trainz 2019, but I know that that's something that you can do, and I think this would be a very appropriate use for that feature, rather than actually having to place down several dozen, oops, sorry, I hit the microphone there, several dozen or, you know, way more than that of these rock assets. And the thing that concerns me about placing down a lot of rock assets is that there's a lot of different, say faces, but I know that that's not the right term. Like 3D modelers are going to yell at me for that, but it's a full rendered circular thing. So even if you place it underground, the game is still rendering all of these polygons that you're not seeing. And you start layering on dozens and dozens of rocks, it could definitely have an impact. So I'm trying to be mindful of that, and as you can see, I kind of combined the actual rock assets with some rock texturing, and I think it actually blends really well. And this is going to be a little bit more challenging too, this creek bed, because unlike the other creek that I did in like episode 3 or something, episode 2 or 3, this is like really rushing. This is supposed to be like really rushing water. So I can't populate the water with some kind of like vegetation. Like you're not gonna see reeds or you know, any grasses or anything like that coming out of the water. It's just gonna be rocks, some debris. Towards the end, I start putting down some like fallen down trees and stuff like that. So I can't cover up some of these ugly spots with too much grass because there's not gonna be that much grass there. So anyway, I'm just continuing on detailing this area, trying to throw some overgrown shrubs and grasses in there. And I kind of picture this as like a little fishing hole. I forgot to mention that. You probably figured that out by now, but I like that as like a little scenic element there. It's just off the train tracks, place where people can pull over and park their car and go have a picnic and go fishing right underneath the bridges there. Definitely reminds me of a lot of places that I've fished at in the Catskills and stuff like that. A lot of good memories there. So I thought that was kind of a cool little addition. I'm going to call it design element. And I do plan on bringing in some of those details elsewhere. A couple other like pull-offs along the creek bed and that sort of thing. This whole area is supposed to sort of represent like a valley in between two hillsides or two mountainsides, I guess. You'll see it in some of the wider shots. I think it's kind of hard to tell here, but we're up in the mountains. The tracks are going up like a 2.5% grade. It's very steep, 2 to 2.5% grade. And right now we're kind of like in between two mountainsides, and we're just following the creek bed. And I just like the idea of that. And in some of the lower angles, if you get down to the track level and stuff like that, it really feels like you're up in the Catskills and surrounded by these mountains and stuff like that. So I like the feel that I'm getting so far. At this point, what I'm trying to do is actually tune up the creek bed so that it's not just this big like dent in the earth. Like this should be sort of a shallower creek bed. It shouldn't be. It's not deep. Maybe at its deepest point where it gets maybe dammed up from some debris and stuff like that, it might only be 5 or 6 feet deep. But for the most part, it's just supposed to be a little dryish brook. So I didn't want it to be super carved out into the earth. So I'm trying to terraform a little bit and keep it kind of shallow. And so for this spot here, I struggled with this for a bit. I really wanted to add like a break wall sort of thing to represent that this is an area that gets washed out a lot. So along the Catskill Mountain branch, the real deal, it was just absolutely plagued by washouts. It followed the Esopus River actually through New York, and it was just constantly getting washed out. And the Catskill Mountain Railroad, even up until just a few years ago, was still repairing washouts along some of these bends. So I wanted this area to look like a section of track that had been washed out so many times, and finally they put up like one of these seawalls or breakwaters or whatever, so to try to prevent erosion and that sort of thing. So I found these on the download station. I think that they look really, really nice. There's 3 different versions of them in different design colors and rock patterns and widths. So if you pause the video, you can probably get the asset name off of the side panel off to the right and get it off the download station for yourself. There's also the KUID number is in the bottom right, so you can look it up directly. So anyway, I'm trying to detail the area there and obviously make it look like it had been washed out previously. And I add I kind of tweak it a little bit more towards the end where I add some details in the creek bed itself, which I think came out really, really nicely. And again, so at this point, as I had mentioned in the last video, I did copy and paste all of the trees in the area before I started working, and that definitely has made a difference for me when it comes to working on an area and detailing it, because it just gives me, as I had said previously, like a backdrop to work against and something to know like where the boundaries are and what I'm trying to go for. So that I found really helpful, and as you can see here, the nice ridge on the right side just looks really great with the trees and everything. And I think these assets, as I had said previously as well, these assets are just looking really good together. I'm really happy about that. So let's see. Working through this section, my intention was to go a little bit further west than I had, but it just took a little bit longer for me to detail some of this stuff than I had expected. And I don't know, like I said, this video ended up becoming a 20-minute video without me even trying to do that. So hopefully you guys find it interesting. I try to make sure that what I'm showing in the video is either techniques that'll be helpful to you guys or assets or detailing and stuff like that. And in fact, I might actually skip ahead a little tiny bit for the next video. I might do some of the detailing work along the creek bed off camera, because I don't know, that might get a little mundane, a little redundant to watch over and over again. Yeah, so On this side, same idea. I wanted there to be... I hit the microphone again, sorry. I wanted there to be this breakwater thing to represent another spot that just frequently gets washed out. The water's coming rushing out of the mountainside, and it hits this bend, and eventually the county or the state or whatever was like, all right, enough. We're tired of repairing these washouts. We're gonna put up a breakwater and make sure this doesn't happen again. So as you can see here, I put down a lot of rocks at this point, and I did a lot of that off camera because there was just a lot of experimenting to see if I can get it to work. I'm still a little iffy about if I like it and if it works or if it doesn't work. Let me know in the comments below what you guys think, if it's too many rocks, if it's not enough rocks. It's a really delicate balance because, like I said, I didn't want to overpopulate it with too many rock assets, but at the same time, I needed to make this look like the water was eroding away the silt and stuff like that, revealing all these brook rocks and stuff like that. So very tricky sort of balance to try to achieve there. And with these sandbars that I just put in there, I'm going to be doing that throughout because that's, I think, pretty common to see in these creek beds. But that one in specific is to represent the washout that had previously happened. That's the sediment that had been washed out, and that's where it lays. So these are some rapids. I thought I would try them out and see how it looks so that the water doesn't look so static. Like I said, the water is on a grade. It is on an angle, so I did want to somehow represent some rapids or some waterfalls and stuff like that here and there to just show that this water is actually flowing downstream and it is moving. I don't know if there's any other assets that are out there. These are ones that I had installed, and I didn't look at the download station to see if there were any other rapids. But if you guys know of anything that looks good or better than this, make sure you let me know so I can cut that in, add it in. So here I'm just trying to bring in a little bit more vegetation in between the rocks, just to signify that they've been there long enough that the vegetation could actually come in undisturbed. Maybe it's been a long time since the water got really high. And in this area, I was originally going to make this into one of those pull-off areas, like a picnic area, but it just ended up not being wide enough. So I'm just going to fill it in with a little bit of scenery and kind of get on with it. But like I said, I'm going to add some of those details a little bit further down. I didn't want to cluster too many of those sort of areas like in one spot either. I thought after the fact, I was like, you know what, maybe it's better that I don't have like two picnic areas that are really close to each other. So I will add it a little bit further upstream, and I think that might look pretty cool. But that is going to do it for today's episode. We're finally into the cinematics here, and I made it to the end. So I'd like to thank you guys for joining me today. I hope you guys had a happy Thanksgiving if you're in the States. This should be airing the day after Thanksgiving. So thanks again for watching. Don't forget to hit that like button if you liked the video, and subscribe if you're not already subscribed. I'll see you guys in the next one.